Total Warhammer 3 is finally upon us, and is probably one of the most hyped Total Wars that I can recall, even surpassing the hype for Rome 2. This is not only a sequel to the excellent Warhammer 2, but also a conclusion to a trilogy focused on the Chaos Gods and fleshing out the Northeast. I myself was really excited for the many factions being introduced, especially Grand Cathay and the Demon Prince. So far, I've completed one campaign with 2 more in progress, so I believe I have a solid base to go off of. So the question is, was it worth the hype? I usually don't recommend to start with the prologue with Total War, but I recommend to do so this time. From here, you can get accustomed to many of the new and returning features, as well as a setup for future events within the campaign. It's hard to describe the story without spoiling anything, but I believe this is the best way to describe it.
Go north.
Other than that, it falls victim to some of the shortcomings of Total War tutorials, mainly that they go on for far too long and can turn off some players as a result. From there, it's a smooth transition into the campaign, which features 10 factions across 7 races, or 12 factions across 8 races if you have the Ogre Kingdoms DLC. I did, so the rest of the review will feature gameplay footage from Grand Cathay, the Demon Prince, and the Ogre Kingdoms. Depending on your faction, you're given a cutscene on where you're placed in the world, presented with some great voice acting. There are also still images to accompany the dialogue and narration, but it feels cheap considering how high quality the cinematics of the trailer are. The images themselves are okay, but it feels like a missed opportunity considering how narrative focused the campaign is, and to me that's one of the biggest draws with the campaign. After certain events, you're given a cutscene on what is ultimately transpiring. Unfortunately, the ending didn't feel as fulfilling as I hoped it would have been, but it wasn't a terrible one by any means. Basically, we won't be having a Mass Effect 3 backlash anytime soon. Anyways, let's move into the campaign proper. Like every other Total War in existence, you build up your faction by recruiting troops and taking over territory. You have 2 victory conditions: either conquer basically everyone, or follow the narrative and gather 4 lost souls from each of the Chaos realms. Your opponents will be attempting to do the same, so it is recommended to move as quickly as possible. We'll get more into some of the campaign mechanics later, as well as the Chaos realms, but for now, let's talk about the battles. If you're familiar with Warhammer 2, you'll feel right at home with many quality of life improvements. One small but very appreciated change is that idle units now have Z's on their unit card to indicate that they are, well, idle. And yes, the unit cards are much more improved compared to the late Warhammer 2 DLC cards that were not up to par. The game also slows down by default when casting a spell in order to make more precise decisions. Some units will also now have a protective barrier, which basically works as a shield. These targets will absorb most spells, so it's better to break the barrier before using them. None of these changes are huge, but all are appreciated nonetheless. What has received a much needed overhaul, however, was the siege battles. Following this game, I was very curious how the siege battles were going to play out. Defenders are now given a set amount of supplies to build up towers and barricades to deal with defenders. These supplies increase during battle from controlling certain points in the settlement. This helps to keep the assaulting forces moving forward, as standing around only benefits the defender. These changes not only apply to major capitals, but also to small settlements within the province. It's honestly a ton of fun and makes minor settlement battles worth playing even when odds are not in your favor. This is even further expanded upon within the Chaos Realm battles. In these battles, your goal is to capture each point and defend it for as long as possible, then move on to the next one. The best way I can describe it is a hybrid of tower defense and real-time combat. You could even spend supply points to bring in reinforcements, heal units, replenish ammo, and even buff a unit's damage and armor. These are a ton of fun to play, especially with a friend, although be prepared as they do go on for a long time. And yeah, we might as well talk about the Chaos Realms. Throughout the campaign, rifts will appear on the map where Chaos forces will invade and spread corruption like crazy. From here, you can close the rift, transport to another rift, or enter the Chaos Realm with your lord. Each realm has its own gimmick, which can be both good and bad. For example, the Blood God Khorne is all about killing, so in his realm your goal is to kill as much as possible. For Slaanesh, your goal is to research the center, resisting the lust of insatiable rewards. I've enjoyed my trek through all of them except for Cinches for being an incredibly confusing and convoluted maze. I usually save that one for last. With the 4 Chaos Gods being very different from each other not only in playstyle and color scheme, Chaos Corruption is now reflected by each of them. For example, Nurgle Corruption will increase the chance of plague spreading, while Khorne Corruption increases attributes of Chaos units. Plain old Chaos Corruption as well as Vampiric and Skaven Corruption are also present. Overall, it's a small change, but it helps further make the gods feel unique. And yeah, let's talk about some of those unique campaign mechanics. One of my most anticipated going in was being able to play and customize the Demon Prince of Chaos. Not only can you name him yourself, but literally swap out body parts with him. Depending on the god you pledge your allegiance to and how much glory you end up generating from them will determine the parts available to you. At first, this is awesome with so many new parts given to you at rapid fire. You can really get some cool looking badass combinations, not only in look but also in functionality. The problem comes in when you realize how similar a lot of these parts actually are in practice. It's a bit disappointing, but hopefully a patch can come through to rebalance some of these parts. For the campaign itself, I gotta be honest, I was a bit underwhelmed. I expected something more from the final battle, and by that time as Greece's Goldtooth, I was so fat with that cash money boy that it was not much of a challenge despite the constant swaths of units charging at me. Add in the somewhat hollow ending, and I'm not sure if I want to pursue the narrative victory condition next time. And speaking of the victory condition, I reached a point in my ogre campaign that I literally had no real threats. I was playing on normal and the ogres are considered to be an easy faction, so I'm pretty sure that playing as Kislev will be a harder time. It also made no sense for me to expand since my goal was waiting for the Chaos Rifts to appear to grab the next soul. When pursuing this goal, it slowed the pace of the campaign to an absolute crawl. If there was a way to rush the appearance of the Chaos Rifts, I would have appreciated that. While every faction is very distinct in playstyle, the variety of units for each faction is on the lower side. For example, Slaaneish's units are very speed focused, but once you come up with a dominant strategy for how to use them battle-wise, there's not much else to experiment with. Khorne is very melee focused and cleaves through enemies like no tomorrow, but that's really it outside of a cannon for some range. This is unfortunately expected as DLC will come in to flesh out the roster. Multiplayer has also seen its fair share of upgrades. Up to 8 players can now play a single campaign together, and for what I didn't even think possible, simultaneous movements. I didn't even think that was possible given the flow of the game, but this is honestly freaking awesome. Games move much quicker and there's far less downtime waiting for your opponent or partner to make their move before you make yours. You can disable this, however, if you prefer a more traditional playstyle. This isn't exclusive to multiplayer, but this is when I discovered the fact that you can now build outposts in allied settlements. This will add troops to their garrison as well as allowing you to recruit troops from your allies. This was giving me some serious Lords of Magic vibes, combining the troops of your armies with that of your ally. It's an awesome feature here, and I can't wait to see the possible combinations in the Immortal Empires campaign. One of my biggest concerns for multiplayer was its stability. It's almost expected now at launch for any game with multiplayer to have huge connection issues. Thankfully, I haven't experienced any disconnects whatsoever, which is surprising given how many people were playing. For the game performance itself, I had several crash to desktops and some frame rate issues. I'm running the game on medium settings with a 1060 6GB video card and a Ryzen 2700X, so not the most recent cards by a long shot, but not necessarily too old. Most of the slowdown tends to happen in the campaign map rather than the battles. Thankfully, it seems that most of these issues have lessened with the latest patch, but only time will tell if these issues will persist as new content is released going forward. For the graphics themselves, the colors are absolutely vivid, especially in the Chaos Realms. The music has also seen a slight improvement with a far more orchestral Dark Souls feel. Some previous tracks from the past games also carry over and both work well here as expected. Whether or not I recommend it comes down to this. At this time, the game lacks the replay value of the previous one, but this will eventually be addressed in due time given Creative Assembly's track record. What is here, however, is great, including the factions as well as the various quality of life improvements throughout. It's another solid entry into the franchise with potential to be even greater once the Immortal Empires campaign is released. For how much fun I've had with this game so far, I still recommend to most players to wait until more content is released. For die-hard fans, this will definitely satisfy your needs, until you want to have Durthu team up with Miao Ying on the battlefield. Thank you guys for watching. As always, apologies for this one being a little late. Hopefully future reviews can be a little more timely. And as always, thank you for watching. This is Powerhouse, signing off.